YouTube, what the crap's going on? HeirofCarthage here, and we're going to be doing a little bit more testing. Testing in Total War Warhammer, specifically focused on the notes from patch 3. Now, I haven't done a real extensive read-through of them. I have done a read-through. I'm going to go ahead and swap over to, well, it doesn't matter who I'm on. We'll stay on the vampires. The very first thing under the balancing section, and I'll have a link to these patch notes if you want to go check it out. It says max heroes in custom/multiplayer battle has been reduced from 4 to 3. So max number of heroes. I do have a mod on for my being able to bring my general, but I don't think the mod would affect anything else. Let's see whether, so here's the heroes category. It says it used to be 4 and now it's 3. Am I missing something? I can spam a whole army of heroes. So what does that mean? It says max heroes in custom/multiplayer has been reduced from 4 to 3. That doesn't appear to be the case at all, from what I can tell. Let's check that it's the case with every faction. So, oh whoops, why am I doing slayers? They're not heroes. They're zeros. Spamming runesmith. I mean, am I missing something? Again, I don't get it. So that patch note is one that I'm going to question. Let's reboot, and I'll try it without the mod on, and we'll see if there's any difference. Alright, the unmodded version. So just to prove it wasn't my mod, I can still totally hero spam in custom battle. So, CA, what's up with that one? Comments? Am I missing anything? Let me know, please, because if I am, would love to know what it is I'm missing. Let's talk about some other patch notes. Let's talk greenskins. There was only 3 patch notes for greenskins. Azag, his cost was increased by 50. They said Mork was too morky and has been nerfed, and Gork has been buffed. Don't know what that means. That's the only 3 notes for greenskins. Alright, not a whole lot to talk about there. Sorry, Azag, you're more expensive. Alright, let's talk Beastmen. So for the Beastmen, there's 3 notes as well. The Giant lost 12 magical attack. I don't really have the old version to compare that against, but just stating. And then 10 charge bonus is what it looks like. So looks like a slight debuff to the Giant. That apparently didn't carry over for the greenskins because they didn't mention it there. So that's interesting that the Giant for the Beastmen is going to be a little bit different. The Cygor had a minor accuracy decrease. Again, I don't know exactly what that means because I can't compare it to the old one. I wish that they would be more specific about some of these things. And then the Chaos Warhounds, both varieties are cheaper multiplayer cost. So that's been a reduction in price, which is probably good because these guys are a little bit expensive for what they did previously. They're still pretty expensive for what they do if you ask me. But yeah, anyway, that's all that's changed for the Beastmen. Tell me if you have any thoughts below. To me, pretty... I mean, I don't know about a whole lot else that I would change about the Beastmen other than just like any faction not being able to spam heroes would be nice. But something tells me that it's... yeah, it's the same for them as it is anybody else. You can just spam heroes. So yeah, what do you think? Did I miss anything on the changes for the Beastmen? I don't think it's very impactful. What do you think? So, the next faction that they talked about was the Dwarfs. Now, there was actually quite a few changes for the Dwarfs, most of which are definitely going to be a positive for them. Dwarf Miners, Warriors, Warriors with Great Weapons, and Quarrelers all got a 25 price reduction. That's pretty significant. And it says Miners and Warriors. It just says Miners, so it was not the Miners with blasting charges, but just standard Miners, standard Warriors. This means that, say for instance, if I pick 8 of these guys to bring a huge main line of Dwarf Warriors, that I have saved effectively 200 gold in the selection of my army. So it adds up, and it's the same thing when you add in Quarrelers. So let's just say that all in all, between Dwarf Warriors and Quarrelers, again, if I had picked 8 units, I save 200 gold, which is pretty important for the Dwarves, because that could make the difference between bringing one more good unit and not being able to bring another good unit. So that change will generally help the Dwarves, and the Dwarves need help right now. There's no doubt about it. Quarreler with Great Weapons got +1 damage, +1 AP damage, and +2 magic attack, I believe? It says MA. Melee attack, sorry. MA. I said magic attack earlier in the giant. MA is melee attack. My bad. So, yeah, there's going to be a little bit extra melee attack for these guys. So the Dwarf Warrior, or the Quarrelers with great weapons, none of that's probably a bad thing. They're pretty expensive, and you need to get something for it. So they buffed them up a little bit. I've got no issue with that. Thunderer's got 2 extra AP damage, increased accuracy, but then they slowed down their reload by 1 second. That's probably a good thing. Again, I don't have anything to compare this to in terms of the previous one because I didn't take note of it or anything, but I mean, 16 armor piercing damage is pretty significant, so the Thunderers are going to be pretty darn good. They were already pretty good against armor. They're going to be very good against armor. The next one that we see is the Gyro Bomber and the Gyrocopter. Now, this does not mention the one with the Brimstone gun. I believe it's the steam gun because it says SG. So it's a +5 range. Probably not a real significant change, but sure, it's not going to hurt anything. Thorgrim is now 50 gold cheaper. That's fine. He's still pretty expensive. You got the Flame Cannon, which is an extra 100 and... yeah, it's... Well, it looks kind of like they messed up their dash there, but I'm assuming that's minus 100. It is minus, because it used to be 1400. So the Flame Cannon... I'll talk about the Flame Cannon here just briefly. The Flame Cannon is brutal. It's absolutely devastating. It's accurate, especially if it gets chevrons. It's very accurate. But the reason you don't see this thing used much is because its range is only 180. And I've tried to use this thing effectively online, and it is extremely difficult because of the flying death squads, and then also because a player knows this thing is devastating, and they're just not going to wander in close to it. And if they have artillery or anything else, they shoot this thing from a distance. In campaign, on the other hand, this thing is a mass murdering machine. It's fantastic at what it does. It can drop shots in all over the place. This is good that the price was reduced. It's going to make bringing this thing less of a risk. So overall, pretty happy that they did that. Does that mean it's all of a sudden going to be a great multiplayer unit? No, I don't think so, just because it's still fairly easy to counter. But I like that it's less risky to bring it. Iron Drake's got a +10 magic resistance. Not really sure why they decided the Iron Drakes needed more magic resistance or what drove that. I've never heard any such complaint, and I don't really see that this is going to make the Iron Drakes more inviting for a player to use. Tell me what you think in the comments. Changes about the Dwarves. Overall, it's going to make them a slightly better faction. Slightly. I still think these guys are probably riding the bottom tier, in my opinion. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, their mass is just not great enough. Against cavalry and flying units can just wreck you as the Dwarves. They'll zoom in, they'll hit you, you have no cavalry, you can't pin them on the ground, you have no poison units, so it's even harder to pin them on the ground. So I find that the Dwarves are just extremely vulnerable. You can win with them. They have some units that are quite good. Quarrelers are quite good, and some of their infantry have some really great defensive stats. But there's a few things in my mind that make the Dwarves particularly weak. And one of them is that Slayers really are not good versus monsters or cavalry. They're really quite bad versus monsters or cavalry. Some people will disagree with me on this, but I've tested these guys time and again, and they just get brutalized by cavalry unless the cavalry doesn't charge them. And even when it doesn't, they don't do all that well for their cost. They're just too expensive for what you get out of these guys. If they gave these guys like a charge defense against large, I think all of a sudden the Slayers might actually be useful. That's just my thought, and that would change the game huge for the Dwarfs. And I also kind of feel like the mass of Dwarves needs to be increased a little bit so that they're not quite so easily knocked back. And I think that would actually start making them more viable. That's just my opinion. What do you all think? Am I on? Am I wrong? What do you think? What's the best way to kind of balance in the Dwarfs a little better in your opinion, or do you think they're fine now? So Bretonia, very few changes here. Mounted Yeomen are going to be 50 gold cheaper. Mounted Yeomen archers, so that was the difference there. So these Mounted Yeomen are the cheap melee cavalry. These are the ones that are cheaper. The Mounted Yeomen archers gained 5 range, which puts them at 125 in terms of the range. It's okay. And then the Hippogriff gained mass, I don't really know what the outcome of that is. Maybe it affects knockback effect or something like that. So again, don't know exactly how that impacts it. Does anybody else know? I mean, I see these changes having very little impact on Bretonnia. The only thing that's going to have a big impact on Bretonnia in my mind is getting the rest of their roster, which hopefully we'll see in an update soon. So the Empire, there's quite a few notes here. Let's walk through each one. That says Outriders RR -5 range. I'm assuming that means the Outriders with the standard rifle. So they have lost 5 range. Outriders were fairly rarely used, except for maybe against Dwarfs or something anyway. Not a really high impact unit in terms of multiplayer. And this is not going to be a big impact in campaign in my mind either. Not really sure why this change was made, to be quite honest. The Griffin has an increase in mass. Again, I don't really understand that change. It's got to be similar to the Hippogriff. Handgunners, similar to the Thunderers, they picked up 2 AP damage, 1 second extra reload time, but they actually lose 2 ammo. Odd indeed. Maybe it's because they're a little cheaper than something like Thunderers. The Crossbowmen lost 2 ammo as well, which is kind of odd. I'm not really sure why. These guys already didn't have a particularly large amount of ammo. So I don't know. That's kind of weird too. Great Swords lost 1 bonus versus infantry. I don't know how this is going to impact them in terms of their performance. I mean, obviously it's going to make them slightly weaker. How much weaker remains to be seen. A slight nerf on the Great Swords isn't going to hurt anything. These guys were really, really fantastic for their price, and it doesn't seem like that's an overbearing change. Spearmen, it says the only thing they changed was their attack speed, which again is really weird. Maybe this makes them a little bit faster when they're charging. Does anybody know what that means, attack speed? Hold the Line and Blood Roar are changed to passive abilities. So if we pick, where is old Carl McFranz? Here he is. So we'll pick the Griffin here. If we go in here, take a look now. Hold the Line. Constant around self. So yeah, that's a huge deal. That's a huge deal. You don't actually have to click the button now, and if you're within a 45-meter radius of Carl Franz or another unit that has this Hold the Line ability, they get 100% charge resistance. That's a really big deal. The +4 leadership is going to be very handy also. Now, Blood Roar, it's 136 cost, but it's a constant -4 leadership in the area, which is also a big deal. Does anybody remember what the leadership penalty was under Blood Roar? Did it change? It doesn't mention that here. Did it used to be -4, or was it -8? I cannot remember. Net of Amontok, the radius has been reduced. That's probably good. Net of Amontok's radius was huge, and it was very easy to net things. The other thing that it says they changed about Net of Amontok is the magic cost, which it looks like it's 10 to use. I feel like that's pretty appropriate. The radius on it is considerably smaller, but, I mean, it's still pretty effective. If you get it in the right spot, you can stop a couple of units during an infantry charge, or you can stop a couple of cavalry units. It's still a very effective spell. Probably was appropriate for be nerfed a little bit, because it is very good and very easy to use prior to this. So I don't know. What do you think? I don't think the Empire took any major blows in the notes here. I mean, they're in good shape. What's your thoughts on the Empire or the patch notes? The Vampire counts had quite a few notes on theirs too. First off, Mr. Fluffy Puppy, the Vargulf, picked up extra attack pushback force. So that'll be interesting to try and test out. Does he throw people around more? Does it help him? Because the Vargulf was always a fun unit, especially in campaign, but they're a little bit weak, and their low leadership means that they crumble very quick. So this was always a bit of an interesting case with the Vargulf. So I think buffing it a little bit probably wouldn't hurt anything. We'll have to test and just see if it seems like it's any more worth it. Manfred, there's -100 cost, only 50 on flying mounts, and MD set to 50 on all mounts. MD? Yeah. Don't know what that is. So yeah, MD, I'm not gathering that right off. Melee defense. Okay, melee defense. That's what it is. So melee defense is set to 50 on all flying mounts. There's Manfred. So if I put him on a flying mount, yeah, melee's at 50. And if I take him off the flying mount, well, it's still 50 on him. It's 50 on his horse. It's 50. Yeah. Okay. Melee defense is set to 50. I guess it's just saying that Manfred's been changed to 50 melee defense, so alright. The Vampire Lord melee defense is set to 45, so that's going to be similar. Let's just make sure that that's the case. So where's our Vampire Lord? Master Necromancer, right here, Vampire Lord. Sure enough, 45, and it's on all mounts. Black Coach, Black Nimbus. What does that mean? That's change resistance to all on Black Nimbus. Increased resistance to 66%. So those notes were kind of placed there weird. So let's look at the Black Coach. So Black Nimbus. Right here. So they increased the damage resistance up to 66. I don't know what it was previously. 175 second recharge. And it also gives the Strider ability to last for 29 seconds. It only affects the coach itself, though, not units around it. So I don't know. I've never found the coach to be all that useful anyway. Let's move on. So Graveguard with great weapons lost 1 bonus versus the infantry. That's honestly a little bit of a surprise to me. The Graveguard with great weapons are barely worth their cost as it is. They're very expensive and not anywhere near the level of like great swords or other stuff like that. So I don't know if that was really a necessary move. Fell Bats lost 20 speed. That's actually a pretty decent nerf to the vampires in the sense that Fell Bats were so fast. They were able to stay away from units like Pegasus and other stuff like that and not be caught, and you could use the bats to swing around and swamp and stop cavalry charges and all that stuff. So bats will still be useful. It's just going to make them a little bit slower. Direwolves lost 50 in their cost in multiplayer. That's probably good. These guys were too expensive. They're still pretty expensive. Manfred is slightly stressed upon the imminent arrival of Dad. Okay, they're just throwing jokes in here now. And now Night Shroud has been given extra radius and much greater strength. I don't know what Night Shroud is. Is that something on Manfred? Missile resistance, causes fear, hide. Life leeching, curse of undeath, hunger. Red Fury, yeah, I don't know what Night Shroud is. So if you all know what that one is, let me know. What do you think about the changes to the vampires? Any thoughts there? So Chaos is the last one. Whoops, I forgot to select them. So let's flip on over. They had a few changes. The Lord of Change got extra AP damage and plus 100 hit points and then plus 15 A. Okay, armor. I'm guessing that is. They didn't want to write out the word armor. So here's the Everwatcher. I believe this is the Lord of Change. So isn't he the Lord of Change? Dragon Ogre Shaggoth? I mean, I'm pretty sure he is. So in any case, and he got extra AP damage, so nothing wrong with that. That would show up here in the weapon strength. His armor piercing damage isn't all that great anyway. He got extra hit points, which probably needs because his armor is still only at 30. And if it was at 15 before, that's absolutely nuts. Anyway, Everwatcher's a cool unit. Let's see, the only other thing they did was they took away 50 cost on Marauder Horsemen, which was definitely appropriate. These guys are still overpriced, in my opinion. And the Marauder Horsemen with Javelins are overpriced as well. That's just my opinion. There was 25 cost off these guys and 50 cost off these. Again, both of those are still well overpriced. I don't know. What's your thoughts, though? Do you think I'm overpriced? I'm just kidding. If you think I'm wrong, let me know. That's a summary of the patch notes, just in terms of balancing. There's other stuff in the patch notes. I talked about it in a previous video with regeneration. If you think there's anything else major in the patch notes that you'd like me to talk about, let me know. Otherwise, just sum that up. Please make sure to leave your opinion in the comments. That's kind of what this was meant for, was to be a little bit of a forum for us to discuss the changes and how we think it impacts things. I don't see anything in here that's crazy changes to any faction, but smaller tweaks, which is probably a good thing. Smaller tweaks are less likely to create more problems. So I'm personally open to just kind of see how all these turn out and see where it drives the game so that we can make an opinion there. Again, tell me what you think. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more, please feel free to subscribe, and then appreciate MSI as always for sponsoring the build that I'm capturing this with, and I appreciate you, the fantastic viewer who decided to come watch my video. It is truly a joy for me to make this for you every day, and I look forward to it. I will see you again soon. HeirofCarthage signing out.